And then the next stage after discrimination is dispassion. And I don't mean dispassion in the sense of not caring or not being interested in what's going on. It's just that discrimination becomes automatic. So you don't, it's like the impressions that are made on you, they're seen and then they disappear. It's like a line on sand, you know, or a line in the air, ultimately, where you're drawing a line in the air and you can see your finger tracing through the air, but then where is it, you know? So your consciousness becomes so infused in your nervous system at that point that you're really, you're in a state of dispassion, but you're in a state of compassionate dispassion where you still act for the benefit of others. And of course, you're not going to walk in front of a truck either. It's not a condition of being totally out of it, not knowing what's going on. I was going to say, and then finally comes unity, which is what I mentioned earlier about you've shifted over from seeing the world in you instead of seeing yourself in the world, and that is a state of oneness. So those are the 5 stages of mind. So you asked, well, what is this state? And you know what it is at the end? And this is the real kicker. When somebody asks who you are, the answer is, well, I don't really know. That's the final answer, because you've become that unboundedness, that eternal unbounded awareness that infuses bliss into the world. You've become that, but it's absolutely unknowable. Even though you can only know it by becoming it. You cannot describe it in words. So the final answer is, I don't know what it is. I'm just it. That's all.
I am that.
But that's not a mind game. It's not a mind game at all. And I think it's very important to emphasize that. And it's something we talk about a lot in the AYP community and in the lessons, because as soon as you get into the mind game of it, you lose the motivation to practice. And when you lose the motivation to practice, you lose the means for developing the very thing that you're after. So
now, once you've gotten established in the inner witness, what's the next step from that point? Should we do more with it?
Well, once you realize that you're starting to see your thoughts and feelings as objects, there will be that natural discrimination arising. And what happens, and we've seen this in the large AYP community, is people just naturally begin to inquire, and they study Ramana Maharshi, and they study Nisargadatta Maharaj, and they study Krishnamurti, and they study some of the living teachers like Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti, and there are many others popping up on the scene now. So people just begin to inquire about inquiry, basically trying to find a formula for what to do with this witnessing. And there's really no right way to do it. It depends a lot on the person and their cultural background and their belief system, because there's also bhakti involved in this, which is the devotion of a person to their chosen ideal, and that ideal can be identified within many cultural contexts, or it can be non-cultural, it can be intellectual, it can be just the object of devotion can be anywhere, depending on what a person's choices are, and that will affect the kind of self-inquiry they might pursue. So I kind of laid it out as not a progression necessarily, but alternatives. Where you can inquire naturally just through observing the world from the point of view of the witness, and you just gradually become more at ease with everything and intuitively develop that sense of oneness. And honestly, that's pretty much the way my path went over the last 35, 40 years, where I just gradually became comfortable with the environment and in my stillness and sort of evolved naturally.
Mm-hmm.
I did read all the old self-inquiry teachers, the Advaita teachers, and so on. But it was what was more important is what was happening within me, and because of the life I was living as a householder and a provider, it just evolved in the environments I was in the offices, and traveling on the airplanes, and wherever I happened to be. It's not necessarily appropriate to be walking around all the time in the office, repeating to yourself, "Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?" You're not going to necessarily be focused on your work. So, but there is that tendency for people to do that. So natural inquiry is kind of where we all end up when we get the witness. But then for those who want to go more structured, there's a class of inquiry that I call releasing, which is like the work of Byron Katie, if you're familiar.
Yes.
She's developed a system called the work,
yes,
which is basically questioning
is it true?
The truth of things that happen in your life.
Yes. Is that where neti comes in?
A little bit. Actually, that's negating, which is something that comes a little later. There's another class of the releasing style of self-inquiry that's come from a fellow named Lester Levinson years ago, who developed the release technique, and that became the Sedona method.
Oh yes, I know Harold Dwoskin.
Yeah. So it's basically just developing an awareness of your thoughts and feelings, and being able to do something with them through discrimination. So that's kind of like the first step. If you're having natural inquiry, then maybe we all have issues in our lives. So the releasing style of self-inquiry, you have a sort of a systematic approach to dealing with the issues in your life. So it's very practical, makes your life better. And these aren't the only two systems. There are many systems out there for releasing emotional tension and emotional issues and psychological issues, and basically just releasing our attachment to the body-mind. Now, after that, and those things you can do at the office, right, or wherever you happen to be. But after that, you get into the more hardcore self-inquiry methods. The next one I call affirmation, which isn't really inquiry, but what you're basically doing is you're affirming that I am that, I am the self, I am God, I am unbounded awareness. So there will be that affirmation that starts to come in, which is not necessarily practical in terms of dealing with people on an everyday basis, but it is something that happens as people move along, as their witness and discrimination advances. And then after that comes the thing that you mentioned.
Neti.
Which is, neti, which is pretty hardcore, because if you take that on prematurely, you end up going to the office and saying, this isn't real, this meeting isn't real, this decision isn't real, what we're doing isn't real, and it's a negation of all the objects of perception, including your thoughts and feelings, and including your sense of self in terms of the body-mind. Now, that's a valid technique, but it's hardcore spiritual technique, and it's only going to work if the witness is present.
Now, I just wanted to say that was one of the strongest experiences I had at the beginning of my real spiritual path, was waking up one morning and my whole life became about neti, out of the blue.
Yeah. And then what happened when you got back to the world?
Well, it was very disconcerting, going around looking at my life saying, this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it. And I remember very strongly feeling that the only thing that really was it in my life at that point were my children. They were still it for some reason. They managed to remain.
Oh, definitely that's where your bhakti came in. They were your chosen ideal. They were the object of your devotion, and that's part of it. And you have to honor that.